Mustafa, who will be taking us through the session. Pelumi, would you like to come on and introduce yourself, please?
Hi, Debola. Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Pelumi Mustafa, as Debola mentioned earlier. I'm a member of the Efikos team, and this evening I'll be here to anchor the panel discussion and the Q&A session. Firstly, I'd like to say a very big thank you to all our panelists that came on today. I'm sure we've all been able to garner a few tips from them, a few key points from everything they've said. And to kick off this session, we're going to start very easy, go from our easy questions and work our way up. And then once we're done with our panel session, then we open the floor to all the questions that the audience have put in the Q&A box. And in case you have a question as we go on, please still feel free to put them in. I'll make sure I go through as much questions as I can go through during the time we have. So thank you. So starting for our three panelists, we're going to start with the easy questions, as they mentioned. What short-term and long-term impact on gas utilization and gas markets are we expecting to see following the entry of Dangote into the energy space? So I think we can start with Dayo, Michi. Anybody can just jump in as soon as they have their answer ready.
Okay, I can go first.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, I think Dangote's entry into the downstream fuel space. So this is downstream selling petrol or selling diesel. I don't think would have an effect on gas utilization. I think those are two separate industries. But in terms of whether it would displace gas as a fuel, I think that it will be interesting to see the numbers that Dangote would sell at. So typically, and all things being equal, gas is typically cheaper than diesel or HFO or marine oil, for example. So it'll be interesting to see what figures Dangote will be selling his fuel at, and then we'll be able to make a call as to whether it's able to displace gas as an alternative fuel.
Thank you so much. Dayo, Yemi, any addition?
Yeah, for me, I think the entry of Dangote into the petroleum refining space has been grossly exaggerated, and that's basically my personal opinion in terms of the sub-region, because there are already functional refineries in the sub-region, and in terms of gas, I don't see any changes. Dangote is a businessman for the first thing, and he doesn't run a charity organization. So it's basically going to be supplying based on the world economic scale and then benchmarks. So I don't see him selling below the prevailing price. And then his emphasis in terms of his refinery is not into gas, so I don't see any changes in terms of supply or distribution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't think Dayo is here. Dayo?
No, I think the guys have done that justice, so let's, in the interest of time.
Okay, thank you. So the next question here is what policies can be put in place to make the expansion of production and supply of gas better in sub-Saharan Africa?
Can you come again?
What policies can be put in place to make the expansion of production and supply of gas better in sub-Saharan Africa?
Okay. For me, in terms of product, I have to upstream, and I'll defer to Muji and Yemi as we go further downstream. I think it's important for us to have the right fiscals in place. Gas as it is not on its own as lucrative as oil. So you can't expect to have the same kind of government take in terms of levies and taxes. So you need to fiscally incentivize investors. That's number one. Number two, which I think is more important, is you need some form of regulatory consistency. So there's a lot of between governments as we move from governments to government. So in order to actually to encourage investment, which was then support production, you actually need to have people need to be sure that, because you see these investments are long-term in nature. So you want people to know that if I'm going to be investing 1 billion over 5 years, it's not that in year 6, because governments have changed, then the terms on which I made the investment will change. So once you know that there's also consistency in policy, it also helps. So it's one, getting the right fiscal incentives in place. Number two, ensuring that there's consistent policy.
Thank you so much. Muji, Yemi, anything to add?
Yeah, just I think for me, it's just the end-to-end planning. And we must recognize that gas is very different from oil. With oil, you have an international market. So once you produce, you just go to the market and you sell. With gas, it doesn't work like that. You cannot store gas. So the government needs to ensure that there's an end-to-end planning, think through the production, from production to the facilities, and then to the market. And when I say market, for example, would be, let's take Nigeria as an example. We all know that the power sector is the biggest user of gas in Nigeria. So if you wanted to expand domestic gas utilization in Nigeria, you need to fix the power sector, ensure that you have cost-reflective tariffs in the power sector. Only then, when you have cost-reflective tariffs, will the gencos, the generating companies, be able to take gas and pay for the gas that you're taking. So that planning needs to be done upfront, especially for countries that are just discovering gas as a resource.
Okay, thank you so much. Yemi, anything to add?
I think in terms of this question, I think they've done justice to it. On the trading, in trading perspective, basically, it's not just something that you jump into in terms of gas. It's not like crude where you can be a broker and then you get an FOB price on this side and then you sell on the other side. It takes a lot of competency and a whole lot of knowing the market. It's an investment that is slow but has steady returns, and then it's capital intensive. So you just jump in and jump out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I know we've heard a lot about capital intensiveness of getting the gas out, and also the price of gas in the market as compared to oil. So that brings me to my next question, which is how viable is it to continue investing in export-driven gas projects, given the international glut in gas? And it's a two-pronged question. And then, can domestic or intra-African exports replace the focus on exports to Europe or Asia? I could say it again if you want me to.
I'm not sure if it's me, but it looks like you were breaking up.
Okay, I'll say it once again. It says, how viable is it to continue investing in export-driven gas projects, given the international glut in gas? And can domestic or intra-African exports replace the focus on exports to Europe or Asia?
Okay, I'll take the first part. I don't understand. I don't know about the gluts in the gas industry. It's basically like any other industry. It's your price. What is your cost price, and then what price are you selling? So I don't understand what you mean by the glut in the industry, because there's always a market for your produce in terms of gas. And then when you're talking, what's your question? The other question, I missed it.
I've said, how viable is it to continue investing in export-driven gas projects?
Well, it's viable. Everybody is investing in it. You can see, as in evidence in Mozambique, in Qatar, there's a market for gas, for LNG, for LPG. And then if anybody in West Africa or in Africa is producing LPG, everybody will be in West Africa will be ready to buy instead of going to the Asias and the Americas for product to secure your supply. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Dayo, Moji, anything to add?
Just to quickly add to what Yemi has said, I don't think it's either or. I think it depends on the situation of the country. And what do I mean by that? Let me give Egypt as an example. Egypt used to be an exporter of gas, maybe like 15 years ago. But when there was a huge increase in domestic demand for gas, they turned to be net importers of gas. So depending on where you are as a country, you may decide to do both, or you might decide to either do LNG import or LNG export. So if you take Nigeria, for example, our gas markets are not very well developed, and there's also the discussion around credit-worthy customers. So you find out that for the IOCs, why won't I do my exports instead of just leaving the gas on the ground? That ends revenue for the government, and government can use that revenue to try and spur economic development for their country. So it depends on, from my perspective, it depends on what phase that country is in terms of domestic gas utilization.
Dayo, anything to?
Yeah, so the only thing I'm going to
forward?
say is that before you decide to invest in a gas plant for exports, you do your economics. And when you're running your economics, you're running what we call life cycle economics. So you're running your economics from now till when you call what you call an end of field life, when you deplete the gas resources. And in running those economics, you need to have price assumptions. Now, if you're going to finance with a bank, I can tell you for free that the bank will be using what you call lowercase prices. So they are going to be stress testing your economics at some of the lowest prices that can obtain. So before you get into making a final investment decision, at least for exports, you would have run those economic cases. So it has nothing to do with glut or not. There'll always be a demand. It might subdue the price for an extended period of time, but you would have run your economics, and as long as it's economic for you, you can still invest regardless of the price, because you would have run it at that price or even at lower prices.
Okay, thank you so much. So at this point in time, I think we're just going to delve straight into the questions being asked by the participants. And the very first question is for Moji. An anonymous attendee asks, she says, aside LPG, what are the other opportunities in the gas ecosystem?
So aside LPG, there are a number of opportunities in the gas ecosystem. It includes one, gas to industries, which is just supplying gas to industries for them to use either for power or for process. There's also gas to power, which is just supplying gas to power plants. There's also exports that we just spoke about, which is LNG. So you can decide to play, where you think you're best suited to play across the value chain. Do you want to do processing? You can go to maybe a supplier and decide to process gas for the person and build gas processing facilities, or you can decide to play in the downstream sector where you're just a local distributor of gas in the country. So that's a range of options to play in the gas ecosystem.
Thank you. And for Dayo, the same anonymous attendee has a question for you.
Okay.
He'd like to, he says, to be more specific, what opportunities are there for SMEs in the gas ecosystem, aside LPG again?
Well, I'm not sure that's that question. I can adequately address it. Apart from LPG, what other opportunities there are? I think I'll throw this one straight to Yemi and Muji. I play the upstream. I'm not shy to throw my hands up when it's not my area of specialty.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so I play in the upstream, not.
You're a big ticket man now, so let's deal with the.
No, there's no big ticket.
Okay, in terms of SMEs, like I'd mentioned in my slides, there's a distribution deficit in the sub-region. So the person can deal with retail in terms of distribution of cylinders. The person can play in the markets where there's kits where you can sell whatever it is that the buyer is buying at a specific amount, you can sell this the corresponding gas that the buyer is willing to sell. In terms of distribution, you can also buy like a truck where you can load trucks from the Apapa depot where there's LPG and distribute. You can also create an app where you can have LPG, where people can do like the diesel app where you can click on a couple of buttons and somebody will bring diesel to your house. You can also do that for LPG. So there's a wild area where you can play in terms of an SME coming into the gas space. I hope I've addressed the person's concerns.
Yes,
Thank
and just
you.
to add on Pelumi to Yemi's point is I think in LPG space, there's a huge opportunity for bottling. So I've heard a number of people talk in the industry and they say we don't have enough cylinders for LPG. So that's another space that an SME can play in, going to manufacturing or importation of these cylinders. You don't actually have to do the bottling of the cylinders, but just the acquisition of the actual cylinders is big business because there's a huge gap in that market.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks, Momoji, for the question. The next question that we're going to bring in from Mr. Oluwasegun Odukoya. He's asking why utilization is low in the WAPI. Is it due to demand? But I'm sure it's not that, but he wants to know why it's so low in the WAPI pipeline.
That's a great question. And from my perspective, I think utilization is low both from a demand and supply cause and effect. So what do I mean by that? In terms of supply, so the WAPI was premised on just one source of supply, which was from Nigeria. And when you have just one source of supply, if anything happens to that source, then you're in trouble. So think of Niger Delta issues and vandalism. So there were periods where there was not enough gas flowing through the WAPI. And the countries that depended on the WAPI for gas had to look for alternative means of getting gas. And as these countries now started to discover gas themselves, Ghana as an example, they started to do projects to supply their own gas instead of relying on the WAPI. So that's how supply is the cost of capacity underutilization. Then when I talk of demand, so obviously there had to be a commercial basis that underpinned the construction of the WAPI. But what happened over time was most of those power plants were not built, or maybe even if they were built, the amount of power that they were generating wasn't the initial estimate on which the commercial of the WAPI was based on. So if you don't have enough demand, what happened was the tariffs had to go up because the demand wasn't there. And when the tariffs went up on the WAPI, it made the price of gas not very competitive. So that also affected utilization. So to sum it up, it's both a supply issue and a demand issue.
Thank you so much. And the next question is not more of a question, it's more of a statement. Mr. Patrick Udetriku, he says, when we talk about Africa, it's easy to think sub-Saharan Africa only. However, North Africa has excellent gas infrastructure and overall utilization. Lessons are there to be learned for the rest of Africa. Any comments on this?
Yes, case in point, Egypt. Egypt has fantastic infrastructure, and it's just what the government has done over the last, I would say, 7 years. So there was a huge investment in infrastructure. There was, they went through these licensing rounds and they signed a number of exploration contracts with international oil and gas companies. There was a deliberate effort to increase the gas reserves and infrastructure. There was also a growing demand in the Egyptian economy for gas. So everything tied together, it just worked. There was a demand and the government did everything to ensure that the supply matched the demand. So yes, he's right. Egypt is a very good example of how gas commercialization should be done in an integrated manner.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, can I just add to that? Sorry,
Okay.
just a quick comment. Yeah, I just want to say that, you see, it's always important, like Moji said, that it has to be done in an integrated manner. You see, a government that sets policies in place to ensure that supply is increased also needs to be matched by people that demand for this product at a competitive price. So one of the problems we have with power that affects the upstream in terms of utilization of gas is that you know that there is no willing buyer at the commercial price, either because we have very low purchasing power as a society, or we have FX issues, or we have government policies that just make people not trust that I have to pay a higher price for power, and it then translates into further upline into more generation. So there's that. Have a low trust deficit or a trust deficit society, then it's very difficult. So like Moji said, you can't pick one in isolation. It's actually you have to look at it holistically, that for me to be able to increase supply, then somebody must be willing to pay the right price for power downstream. And until we're able to address it as a problem, one problem as against setting different policies for different aspects of the value chain, I'm not sure we'll be able to get it right.
Okay, thank you so much. Mr. Patrick again has another question, but this time it's for Yemi. He says 92% of Cote d'Ivoire's LPG supply is via import. Where does the supply come from?
So the supply is brought in by the national oil company, and then the national oil company has contract that he has signed up, long-term contract that he has signed up with two trading companies in order to hedge the risk of fluctuation in prices. So they've signed a long-term contract with two trading companies, and then they bring it from the US or from Europe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. One more question from Mr. Oluwasegun Odukoya. He says, what is the impact of pricing on LPG development and its infrastructure? This is open to all panelists. What is the impact of pricing on LPG development and its infrastructure?
The impact of pricing and development.
Yeah.
In terms of pricing, it depends on
I think you're breaking up.
You can't say. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yes.
Yeah. So in terms of pricing, you can't. There are different fields. There's the upstream, there's the midstream, and then there's the downstream. So you can't really. You have to be specific exactly what parts of the value chain you're talking about to be able to talk about the effect on the eventual consumer or the client.
From his line of questioning, I would think he's going for upstream production. What is the impact of pricing on LPG development and its infrastructure?
So let me try and take this. Basically, the thing is, like I said, when you're trying to develop infrastructure or you're trying to move a project forward, at least to bring out the gas from the ground, either for LPG or say for an LNG, for example. Now, you run your economics. Price is a fantastic input into your economics, but is an input that you cannot control. So for project finance guys, price is not just the only thing we look at, but basically what the price does is, even for example, now I'll give you an example. I worked on on a project finance a few years ago when oil price was maybe like 60 or 65, and the bankers were not willing to go above 45 per barrel. But eventually, if you look at what happened last year, prices went to 20. So because it's a very uncontrollable factor, as much as possible, you try economics, you try to keep price, the effect of price on your economics to as little or as possible. So you keep your price factor, so you want to go with the lowest price possible. So it doesn't matter if the prices go up today, or it still would not really factor into what you're going to develop, because at the end of the day, you're not going to be working with the price of the day. You're looking at it from a life cycle perspective. So for me, I feel like there are more important factors in terms of developing the gas infrastructure, especially from an upstream perspective, than price. There is the fact that you want to make sure that you have the right policies in place, such that whatever the price is, the project will still be economic.
Thank you so much, Dayo. Moji, anything to add on that, or do we go to the next question? Okay. So one more for Mr. Patrick. Thank you. One more for Mr. Patrick. This is for all panelists to jump on. He says, the opportunities I see are in gas policy advocacy to incentivize upstream gas development, infrastructure financing, and regional manufacturing of major equipment in the value chain, e.g. LPG storage tanks, which unfortunately are still being produced basically in China or India. So it's more of a statement, and he just wants to hear your feedback on the statement.
I can jump on this. In terms of the value chain, there on the mid to downstream bits, there's so many opportunities to jump on and to partner with the government or go solo as a private investor. In terms of, there's gross inadequacy in terms of storage infrastructure. That's why countries like Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire and Nigeria, to be specific, have to have distribution problems. When you have storage infrastructure where you can store products and then you can push them out into the bulk buyers, then it will create awareness where you can push products to the eventual bulk buyers and then the eventual consumers. But there's a huge case of inadequacy of storage, and then it's an issue, and then it's an opportunity for investments. That said, when you push in products to the storage facility, the eventual consumer is not just going to come with his cup or his plates to come and get the LPG. It has to come in the cylinders. And then there's an opportunity to get people to invest in gas filling plants where they can store the gas in the cylinders, and then they push it to the eventual to the bulk buyers and then the sellers. So in terms of the cylinders here, there are two plays. Either you import the cylinders from China or from somewhere cheaper, or you create a company where you can produce the cylinders locally. Now, when you import the cylinders from China, there's so much that the regulator can do. The regulator is not going to check all the cylinders. They're not going to put in people that will check all the cylinders for leakages and whatnot. So there's a problem there. There's a gap there. So they can't check whether the integrity of those cylinders that you're bringing in. However, if you have a company set up in Nigeria or Cote d'Ivoire or Ghana, for instance, you have where you're welding the cylinders and then you just bring in the steel and whatnot. There's a way where the regulators can come into your facility and then they do spot checks on the bottles that you have welded or that you have built or that you have produced, so they can do spot checks and whatnot. But if you are importing 3 million bottles, for instance, from China, the truth is that nobody's going to have the time to sit down over 3 million bottles and check whether the integrity of one bottle is good. So there might be a problem there in terms of integrity of the bottles and whatnot. But going back to what Mr. Patrick Udechukwu said, there's so many parts of the value chain that you can invest in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
Just a quick one. I mean, from a broad policy perspective, lots of advocacy that's at least in Nigeria, it's resulted in the draft PIB that has at least compared to oil, very generous gas terms. And there's a recognition, I think, from policymakers that there needs to be a deliberate effort to incentivize people to invest in gas. First of all, maybe because we don't even have as much oil as we do gas. So from even a survival perspective, you need to start looking at investing in gas to bring that resource from the ground. Also because there's so much need, not just say Nigeria. Nigeria has the highest gas reserves in the region. So I would like to focus on Nigeria, not just in Nigeria, but there's so much need across the sub-region. And even if you can just lay it across the West African coast, like the West African pipeline, you can easily supply 5, 6, 7, 8 countries from the resource that you have. So there's a need for it. There's the resource. All we just need to do is marry. And there's a lot of advocacy that's going on. You see, the thing is, because oil was relatively easy money, in terms of it had come in, by the time we knew what we were doing, production had started, there had not been as much focus on gas. Now the focus is coming, but there's a lot of work to be done in terms of, you cannot have the approach you have as governments in terms of government take to oil that you have to gas. They are two different resources. They have different kinds of, what do you call it now? Different kinds of returns on your investment. So an investor might not be as incentivized to do gas as they would to do oil because the revenue is not as high. So the work going on there is more like, how can we marry this resource we have in the ground with the demand that we have and ensure that the government is able to look through the value chain to ensure that, yeah, we get power to the people, we make money in the process, we invest in our gas, we even improve the environment because gas is cleaner source of energy than the current ones we have at the moment. Now, the advocacy will never end. There's been some progress, I have to admit, with the PIB, but until it's passed, you don't know where we stand with that. So I agree with you, Mr. Patrick. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done, but I know work is being done, and we can see the results in the draft PIB that has so much more generous gas terms, recognizing the need to develop gas and incentivize that development than we do for oil.
Thank you so much, Daya. Thank you so much. So to wrap up our Q&A session, we'll have the final question from Muji. It says, if you were to identify 2 key lessons learned from the limited success of the WAGP, what would they be?
Thanks, Malumi. I think we touched on that earlier in the discussions. I think one is make sure that you diversify your source of supply so that you're not underpinning a 700-kilometer pipeline on just one source of supply. What happens when that supply gets interrupted? I think the second would be to ensure that if we're building such a pipeline, we have a good line of sight to the projects that would underpin the gas that will be transported by the pipeline. So if you're going to build a 700-kilometer pipeline, what are the power plants that are going to take gas? You want to make sure that you understand the project schedules when those power plants come on stream to ensure that you have enough capacity utilization of the pipeline, because that also drives the tariff that will be charged by the pipeline. And the tariff also is part of what the final cost of gas would be. So those would be two key lessons from the current experience with WACB.
Thank you so much, Maggie. So at this point, we'd like to close the Q&A session, and like to say our final thank yous to all our panelists for answering all the questions being raised by the audience superbly. And once again, thank you the audience also for joining us today. And I'll hand over to our anchor, Debola, to close the session.
Thank you very much, Pelumi, and a big thank you to our panelists for all your contributions today. You know, if I wanted to start listing all the various points and useful pieces of information I've gained from this webinar, I'd probably be here for quite a while. So I'd encourage you all to, you know, listen back to the recording, pay attention, pick up valuable pieces of information. But I think ending on that note, that the advocacy cannot stop for increasing gas usage. We all need to kind of keep banging on the drum and doing all our parts really to encourage increased gas usage for that goal of really powering Africa's future and, you know, really improving energy access, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. I'd like to say another big thank you to our panelists and just give them a few moments to say a final shout out to anyone if they would like to at this point. Dayo?
Well, I would just like to thank the guys. It's always good to be asked to come back. It means that you either did very badly, they wanted to come and redeem your image, or they think you have some value to add. I'd like to thank Yemi and Muji. To gas, apart from the upstream, is not a field, at least after the upstream, is not a field I'm familiar with. So I actually learned quite a lot from them, and I think the enduring image I'm living with is Muji's last slide. It's the most powerful slides are the ones without words. I think the challenge for us is to find a way to ensure that our continent does not remain being the dark continent. I think that's, for me, that's the enduring image I'm taking from this. Thanks, Muji, for that. It's really quite striking. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dayo.
All right, should I go next?
Yes, please.
All right. Thank you guys for listening in, and a very big thank you to the Efikos group for inviting me to come and share the little that I know. And thank you to Dayo and Yemi. It was very, very interesting topic. I think that the gas industry is very exciting, especially in West Africa and I dare say Nigeria, because it's emerging. So there's a huge opportunity to influence, whether it's through policy or advocacy. So I encourage us all to keep the discussion going. And I know that with time, we would make that impact that we're all looking, or the change that we're all desiring to see when it comes to gas utilization across West Africa and indeed Nigeria. So thank you very much. It was a wonderful experience.
Thank you. I haven't forgotten about the fitness tips. So we may have run out of time now, but I'll definitely be in touch.
No worries.
Yemi, any final words?
Yeah, thank you very much for the Efikos group, especially Tolu Awudere, who bullied me into this session. In terms of there are projects that are already going on in terms of for the future, and I'm going to improve infrastructure. We just need to continue to push in terms individually and as a group. Advocacy is key for clean energy and for good health. There's so many problems in Africa, and getting clean energy off the books is just one of it. The medium age of for Africa is about 55, survival age about 55 to 56. We can increase that and then remove clean energy as one of our issues. I think it's key that we continue to push and create awareness in terms of clean energy, solar, LPG, CNG, and what have you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yemi. And on that note, I would like to bring today's webinar to a close. Thank you very much for your attention and joining us today. If you've got any feedback, comments, or suggestions for future webinars, we'd like to hear from you. You can email us at our email address, efikos@efikos.co.uk, or you could leave a message on our LinkedIn profile as well, or just respond to the email you received to register for this webinar. Thank you very much and hope you can join us next time for our next webinar. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Dewa.